apparently Brian Flores is trying to file a class action lawsuit against the NFL because of their hiring practices. His new lawyers tweeted out, on the first day of Black History Month, it's our great privilege to represent Brian Flores in his class action complaint against the NFL. This case seeks to level the playing field in the hope that future owners and coaches will be representative of the athletes who are playing the great game. We fully expect coaches and players of all races to support Brian as he embarks on his journey to create positive change. Brian Flores is never going to be a head coach ever again. The slash and burn is unbelievable. Now, look, I all I can tell you is what I've seen is I thought he was a pretty good coach. Clearly, he didn't get along with Chris Greer. Now, just so we're aware, Chris Greer is black. Okay, he worked for now his owner was not, but the owner chose the general manager who he had worked with longer than the head coach. And by all accounts, there were enough people in that organization that had a similar feeling in terms of their dealing with Brian Flores. But the burn it down first, it makes no sense. Makes no sense. And he's using a text where Bill Belichick mistakenly texted him instead of texting Brian Daboll as like, look, I was only being brought in for the Rooney Rule. Let's keep in mind, Brian Flores already interviewed for the Jacksonville Jaguars job as well as the Houston Texans job. So it's amazing. So here's the text exchange. Buyer, you want to be Bill Belichick or do you want to be Brian Flores?
I can be Bill Belichick.
Okay, I'll be Brian Flores. Go.
Oh, okay. Hold on. I gotta get the text messages up because there's a lot of details in this whole thing. So I didn't realize that we were role playing here. So all right, here we go. Sounds like you have landed. Congrats.
Did you hear something I didn't hear?
Giants?
I interview on Thursday. I think I have a shot at it.
Got it. I hear from Buffalo and the Giants that you are their guy. Hope it works out if you want it to.
That's definitely what I want. I hope you're right, Coach. Thank you. Coach, are you talking to Brian Flores or Brian Daboll? Just making sure.
Sorry. I bleeped this up. I double-checked and I misread the text. I think they're naming Daboll. Sorry about that, BB.
Thanks, Bill. But if you notice, thank you
very much.
It was a couple hours later, by the way. Like he left him on red and then got back to him. So Flores's take is going to be, well, they already knew it was going to be Brian Daboll. They just brought me in, so they fit the Rooney Rule. By the way, I actually believe that. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's other stuff in addition to this that is damning to one organization as well.
Well, he said that Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, offered to pay him $100,000 a loss in order to tank. Now, that was this first year, correct? That was before they drafted
2019 season. Yep,
right. That's what which we all thought they were tanking, and they were tanking for Tua.
Correct.
That is damning. It is damning. Now, he does not have any proof of that, right? Unless he has proof of that, it is hearsay. But the idea of losing with the intention of losing is not we talked about. Everybody talked about. Everybody knew they were tanking. But again, does any of this prove racism is a part of hiring practice? What it will do is it will probably make sure that Jacksonville and that Houston, okay, they hire black coaches. But I would guess for Brian Flores, this is, at least in the short term, nobody's hiring you. Sue the NFL. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Had a job for 3 years, interviewed for several jobs, finalist for a couple of jobs, and this is what you do as a knee-jerk reaction because you're mad? And of course Brian Daboll's the guy. They hired the assistant GM. Guys bring with them people they've worked with previously. And it all makes sense. Flores, I believe, was somebody the owner, John Mara, wanted to take a look at it. And just because you have somebody you want to hire doesn't mean that you don't want to at least talk to Brian Flores and get his perspective on things. So my take is, and look, I understand that when you looked at the numbers of who is getting jobs, like in this most recent cycle, it hasn't been nearly as good as it should be. It hasn't been nearly as good as it should be. But we should also point out that 2 black GMs have just been hired. Thus, those numbers continue to grow. And, by the way, they're 2 guys from very different background. Ryan Poles is a former player who, after he got out of playing, got right into the front office and had a minimal paying job and worked his way up. The other one, Bayer, help me out. How do I pronounce his name from Minnesota?
The new GM?
Yep.
I don't. I don't have it in front of me. Sorry, I'm trying to go through this
I'm
whole...
sorry.
No, that's all right. I'm just the whole lawsuit.
Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who is, by all accounts, an absolutely brilliant dude, right? He was doing derivatives, and then he started working in the Niners, with the Niners front office, did some cap stuff, did some analytics work, and whatever. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and who does he hire? Like right now, is he going to hire D'Amico Ryans from San Francisco, or is he going to hire Jim Harbaugh, who he worked with when he was in San Francisco? That's what the 2 finalists for. But just saying it's racist when there's no, what is he talking about? The tanking one is probably the most damning thing. The text from Bill Belichick, like, well, what did you expect to have happen? When they hired the GM from Buffalo and Brian Daboll is the quarterback whisperer and Josh Allen looks completely different the last 2 years than he looked previously, of course he's going to get a job. Why shouldn't he get a job? Let's get to Dan Beyer, who is studying up on this lawsuit.
Yeah. So in addition to there are 3 teams that are basically named in this lawsuit. The Dolphins. Not only did Flores claim that Stephen Ross offered to pay him $100,000 for each loss, also claims that Ross tried to get Flores to meet with a prominent quarterback that was under contract with a different team to try to bring him to Miami on a couple of different occasions, including one in a marina. Ross tried to get Flores to meet with this quarterback who, ironically, or just happened to show up at this marina at a time that Ross and Flores were there. Flores says that he left the meeting. He also claims when it comes to the Denver Broncos that he went for an interview prior to becoming the Dolphins head coach, that John Elway and Joe Ellis showed up for the interview an hour late, felt they were disheveled after possibly a night of drinking, and then kind of held a sham of an interview so they could end up hiring Vic Fangio. So those were the claims that Brian Flores made against the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, and New York Giants, in addition to what we did with the Bill Belichick scenario.
I want to get into this lawsuit. I want to have an open discussion about it, because I think one of the things that we're doing is, we're labeling everything racism. And it gets really, I'm not going to sit here and tell you racism doesn't exist. And I'm not going to tell you that there wasn't a long storyline going back 40 years ago of the black quarterback not being as well regarded in terms of their ability to be an NFL quarterback. But I have to tell you, I just think this is an awful look for Brian Flores. Look, Brian Flores, this is the God's honest truth. He got hired before the 19 season. Is that right, Dan Beyer? Was that?
Yes.
Am I right? Okay.
Yep.
So the year before, it was 2018. He had not yet been, I don't believe, the full-time defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. He was a linebackers coach. And I know a couple of teams that brought him in that year. And I believe one of the reasons he was brought in because of the Rooney Rule. Like, he was a young, well-regarded guy in his 30s in New England. People liked him. And I had a GM tell me the year before, not hiring him, but, man, he's going to be a good head coach somewhere. He's got whatever the it is, organization, his personal discipline, his leadership capabilities, his knowledge of the NFL game. Like, he's going to be a dude. And if somebody wants to spend the time and search through my hundreds of thousands of tweets, you can see that. You can find that. Again, that's Brian Flores is going to be I put Brian Flores is going to be a head coach in 6 months, and that was right when that season started. And he was the defensive. I don't even know if he was the defensive coordinator. I think he was still the linebackers coach. I think 18-19 he was the defensive coordinator. So for 1 year he's their defense coordinator, and early on that season I tweeted out it's going to be a head coach, and he was. But that's what the Rooney Rule is intended to give you voices outside of the ones that you expect. And the perfect example is the New York Giants. The Giants had, once they decided on a GM, it was a GM that was going along with the coach. It was a package deal. And while it may not feel good, it's also, like, how does he know that they had decided on Daboll? Daboll being the favorite is not every game you go in, somebody's a favorite. That doesn't mean it doesn't change. Every interview goes in, you being the favorite doesn't mean it doesn't change. But the assumption of racism is so divisive. So divisive. It's like the Denver thing where part of the accusations are that he does not believe he got a fair strike or fair shake at being the Broncos head coach. That they were already going to hire Vic Fangio. Does anybody here's what I want you to realize did Vic Fangio, and I know some of why. Vic Fangio started coaching in the National Football League in 1984. He got his first head coaching job in 2019. He'd been in the league for 35 years before he got his shot, and is a very well-regarded defensive coordinator. So the point is, these jobs are hard to get. Hard to get. And Flores had one and still may get another one. I don't think so. I think this is a really tough pill to swallow, right? Like, man, this guy's calling our whole league racist when you're interviewing for all these different jobs. Do we hire him? Okay, so now we've had a chance to kind of dive into this Brian Flores lawsuit. I've been able to read some of this stuff. And there's a bunch of things, okay? So first there's the Rooney Rule, which I am a proponent of. Okay, I'm a proponent of. And what's interesting is, it's like, I'm not really sure how the Rooney Rule became a bad thing, right? Became a bad thing. And there were some proposals last year. It was last year, right, where there were proposals of even further punishments or bonuses, really, for teams that chose to hire not just black coaches, but black front office executives, some of which have changed in the rules. So Brian Flores was fired by the Miami Dolphins, and if you want to know how he took it, the answer is not well. He's suing the league with a class action lawsuit, claiming he wants to eliminate the NFL's racist hiring practices. Okay. So he also goes into detail talking about Stephen Ross, his former boss and owner of the Miami Dolphins, and how Stephen Ross, he alleges, offered him $100,000 to lose a game. That's a damning allegation. By the way, it is not in any way racially discriminatory. He also alleges that Stephen Ross wanted him to make a bump, like just happen to show up and meet with Tom Brady, whom we all know Tom Brady, one of the teams he considered when he left Tampa a year later, was the Miami Dolphins. A damning allegation in terms of trying to poach somebody's player and tampering, but you know it's not racial discrimination. And he feels like Vic Fangio was already the guy in Denver. That's why when John Elway and his GM showed up to interview him, they looked disheveled and like they'd been out late drinking. Now, the first thing is, regardless of if the candidates were chosen previously, that they, if the candidates were chosen previous to his interview, that does not make it racially discriminatory. You have to, it's not, this is a lawsuit designed to get your attention, but dig a little bit, and those allegations, though they're damning against Stephen Ross and the Dolphins who fired him, they don't have anything to do with the color of his skin. Zero. Am I wrong, Buyer? Is there anything that can be taken as racially discriminatory from those particular arguments?
I think that the Rooney Rule, the original intent was a just rule, but I think that teams now don't use it in what the heart of the reason that it was designed for. And I think that's what Brian Flores is trying to point out.
He got the job. Listen, this is a real story, okay? I have a couple friends that are GMs in the league. In 2018, it wasn't just because of the Rooney Rule, because I know a couple other black coaches who were hired in that cycle. But what the Rooney Rule does, the design of it, is challenges you to find a young or a different candidate than your normal traditional pool, and hopefully a black candidate, okay? And that's what he was. He got an interview for a couple of jobs. He was a linebackers coach. He'd been in the league 9 years at the time. Like, that's relatively quickly. Okay? The next year, he's defense coordinator. 1 year, he got the job. If I were him, I would say, like, hey, you know, the Rooney Rule is actually pretty good. Got me in this cycle, got me some interviews the year before I got my job. I just don't like the application of the Rooney Rule and how I feel like I was being used when I was in New York. Now, the Giants could easily sit there and go, like, look, that's not really the case of what happened. You know, we searched for a general manager. The general manager came in. He had his favorite, but we wanted to listen to other people, and then we decided on a coach. None of that has anything to do with the fact that he's black. And I'm not disputing that there are instances where, hey, we got to interview a minority candidate, even though we already found our coach. But there are coaches that are hired that, you know, it's like Byron Leftwich. You know, Byron Leftwich wants the GM out, Trent Baalke out in Jacksonville. If a change is made and there's a new general manager in Jacksonville, they're not going to interview any other candidates. Why? Because Byron Leftwich gets his guy. That's how business works. Jay Stu, what do you think?
First of all, I think it's a great talk show story. Great in this, that there's so much meat here. That Bill Belichick misfired text, all of us could relate to that. That gnawing feeling in your stomach when you send it to the wrong person. And then all of this. I mean, it's so serious, and I think a lot of people are going to pay for this. And it's kind of sad, to be honest. I'm shocked that he's doing this. This young in his career with so much in front of him, and it shows you how much integrity he has. I mean, you're kind of reminded of Kurt Flood. You're sacrificing your career, basically, to take a stand. So from that respect, it's kind of admirable. But, yeah, I mean, lots of thoughts. This story is immense.
Yeah, it's big.